Hey there, everyone. Noah Newman. I'm a third-year medical student at Wake Forest School of Medicine, and welcome to tonight's virtual town hall. The COVID-19 pandemic has dramatically changed the medical community across the United States. Students and institutions have had to adapt rapidly to continuously changing circumstances and guidelines. These changes have left students and institutions to adjust without much precedence or guidance of how to best do so. Tonight's virtual town hall is for pre-medical students and medical school applicants. It's to voice your questions. It's for leaders in the medical education system to voice the challenges they are facing. We hope you and your peers will tune in to bring these important conversations to the national stage. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce one of my friends and collaborators who worked very hard with me on tonight's show. Meet Abdallah, a recent graduate from Emory University who has been involved with YPI now for several years. Abdallah, I'd like to give you the stage a little bit to talk about YPI and your involvement with it and sort of what the organization is.
Hello, Noah. Thank you for having me. So I'd like to tell you all a little bit about YPI. YPI's mission is to increase the diversity in medicine. And we essentially do that by sending medical students into the community, into middle schools, high schools, and colleges to really foster youth's interest in medicine. We provide the necessary resources and mentorship to really educate the community about what it's like to be a doctor and the process of becoming one. We serve about 300 students per semester with 60% underrepresented minorities and 70% female. We hope that our efforts will cultivate this interest in medicine within these communities and ultimately improve patient-provider relations and medication adherence down the line. At YPI, we make sure that every student has the mentorship and the guidance they need to become the doctor they want to be.
Thank you, Abdallah. That was great. And we'll hear from you at the end. But in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and prepare for our panel. First things first, if at any point you have questions for our panelists, please post them in the comments section. Ask as many as you like. Please be sure to keep them concise and in different comments so we can ask one at a time and keep the conversation going. We'll do our best to share them with our panelists. We also appreciate your feedback, so please take some time towards the end of the broadcast to fill out our very brief survey. We'll choose one individual who completed the survey to receive a set of Frank Netter Anatomy flashcards, a great learning resource for incoming medical students during their anatomy. Please go ahead and share this stream with your friends and followers. Our goal is to help and reach as many applicants as possible, especially during this challenging time. Now to our panel. First up tonight, we have Dr. Carlton Young. He is from the University of Alabama at Birmingham School of Medicine and serves as the Assistant Dean for Medical Student Diversity and Inclusion. We also have Miss Alyssa Cannataro. She is at Rush Medical College, and she serves as the Assistant Director of Admissions and Recruitment. And finally, we have Mr. Christian Essman. He is at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine and serves as the Senior Director of Admissions and Financial Aid. So we're going to start off tonight by discussing the secondary applications. So for the first question, I'd like to bring up this question about how secondaries are presented. So students receive all kinds of questions in the secondaries, but generally they tend to be a similar set. You guys have probably met and talked to students at your schools, read through secondaries before. So my question is, what sort of responses stand out to you in your committees, or how can students best stand out through these written portions of their applications? Ms. Cannataro, we can start with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Noah. Really excellent question, because for us, we use our secondary application to really get a sense of those students who are going to fit with our mission. We are a very mission-driven institution, and our goal is to attract and matriculate students who are going to really live that mission when they're on our campus. And so a lot of the questions in our secondary are focused on aspects that correlate to our mission. And we want to see those students who really have a passion for the same things that we do. One of them being community service.
Okay, great. So really resonating with the mission of the school and bringing that out in their answers.
Absolutely.
Mr. Essman?
I mean, secondary applications are obviously school specific. So we're all looking for things that mean something to us. So some schools have one essay, some have 8 or 10. It can really vary. So I think it's important that students take the time to write responses for that institution versus like going, well, this is kind of close to that one. Let me cut and copy and paste it into that one, into the other schools, because it's really close. So it's that important where you really need to take the time to craft those responses, and above all, show your reflections in your responses. I think that's where we really get the feel of the student, when we hear their reflections and kind of feel with emotion or passion, whatever they're trying to demonstrate to us.
Right. I love that. Dr. Young?
Yeah, I have to echo both of the other two panelists. A lot of times we'll get secondaries and it seems as though they've written it for another institution. And you have to, especially us, we're extremely mission driven as well, being here in the deep South. We have an obligation to Alabama. So if you want to come here, we got to say, like, why do you want to come down here? One example is our primary care track. That is a longitudinal track. You get to see everything beginning to end. And we have people applying for that, yet they've done nothing that really shows they really want to do primary care, nor do they answer the question as to why they want to do primary care within their answer or their personal statement. So I think Mr. Essman is completely correct. You've got to be careful and be cognizant of what you're writing, and just don't whitewash it or just use the same answers over and over.
Yeah, I love that. And the next question we're going to turn to is going to focus on medical school statistics. So this one is about MSAR, which is a valuable resource. Many students use this to look at requirements for GPAs, MCAT scores, etc. What do you tell students that are interested in applying to your institution but are anxious? Maybe they don't have those exact numbers or meet those exact thresholds. Do you discourage them? Do you encourage them to apply anyways? Mr. Essman, we can start with you this time.
Well, I always tell applicants that be careful, because there's a range there. They go to 90% and they go as low as 10%. They don't give you the whole range. And there's always a story that goes with every applicant. Yeah, there are numbers attached to them, but there's always a story. And you don't know if it's an applicant where you see maybe they have a little bit lower GPA, but their MCAT was higher. They had a lower GPA, but they went and got their PhD or something, and then their MCAT went up, or something else. There's always a story behind the numbers. So I think it's good to look at those numbers to at least get an idea of what the ranges are. But I mean, just know that just because your MCAT or GPA is not at that average, it's not that you're out of the game. I mean, we take a range of students. So, but I think it gives you a realistic potential idea of what the potential could be there. But but there's always a story.
Right. Dr. Young?
Yeah, I have to emphasize that as well. We use a holistic review. I'm sure the other two panelists do as well. We look at everything. And the students have to understand that the MCAT and GPA only predict roughly how well you do on step one. It doesn't say what type of physician you're going to be. It just gives us a barometer to make sure you have enough fundamental information that you're coming into medical school that you're not going to get blown away. Because everybody has to have enough information in their repertoire that when they hit the doors, that it's as my dean talks about, college is drinking out of a garden hose, whereas med school is drinking out of a fire hydrant. And if you don't have the foundations, you'll get blown away. But as Mr. Essman said, we look at a wide variety of things. You could have a mediocre MCAT, but a great GPA, BCPM. So there are lots of different combinations. And you can have a story behind why you started slowly and did a lot better later on. So you got to tell your story. Be you. Don't you just be who you are and be honest. that's tell your story so we can put the pieces together.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that fact that college, drinking out of a hose, medical school drinking out of a fire hydrant. It's a very different ballpark. So it's good to be prepared. Ms. Cannataro?
Yeah, I would second everything that my colleagues just said. Metrics are one tiny component of the application. Yes, you need to have a strong foundation in the sciences to be successful in medical school. And that's simply because, like one of my colleagues just shared with us, you need to have that strong foundation so that you can hit the ground running and that you can be successful in medical school. But there is so much more to being a successful physician than having strong academics. And that's why we all use the holistic approach. We look at all aspects of the application when making that final decision. So keep in mind that, yes, those metrics are there for a reason, but they're a range, they're an average. And there is so much more to you as an applicant and so much more to your story than the academic component.
Right. And I really do wholeheartedly agree with that you are so much more than a GPA or an MCAT score. It's unfortunate that people don't always realize that, but it's so true. The next question I'd like to turn to is about the impact of coronavirus on extracurricular activities. So this one is from one of our audience members. If rising sophomores, juniors, or seniors in college were unable to do volunteering, shadowing, or research during the summer due to COVID, canceling opportunities, will this be looked down upon? Dr. Young, we can start off with you.
Yeah, it's a great question. Obviously, everybody applying to medical school or other professional schools that require those types of activities are still struggling to try to figure out how we're going to look at students who have not had the opportunity to do those things that we traditionally look at. And I'm sure my other colleagues will have their ideas. They may still be evolving, but we do have a section in our secondary that allows you to explain how COVID has impacted you. Perhaps plans that you had that you couldn't do, perhaps what other independent study that you did, whatever. But at least try to do something. But we understand that, and we're trying to adjust our metrics to try to figure this out, just like everybody else. I think it's still evolving. I don't have a direct answer as to say you need to do X, Y, and Z. Look for opportunities and unusual places, and keep an eye out. It's a possibility that things may open up in January. I don't know. We're not even allowed to have students, undergrad students, until January, roughly. So I think that most folks will understand if you don't have the same number of hours, but a lot of that is more important. What did you get out of that activity? Folks can list 100 gazillion activities, but if they haven't internalized and grown from that experience, what good were those experiences if you didn't learn anything from them?
Right,
Or do you have the ability to express yourself as to what you learned from them? So, it's more important to be able to express yourself than to just have a long litany of things. Anyway, but I'll let my colleagues.
Yeah, no, of course. Ms. Cannataro?
Yeah, I would completely agree with Dr. Young. We always say quality over quantity, and the same thing exists now. So if students aren't able to get the quantity of numbers that they would have liked to before applying, of course, we absolutely understand that. We realize that the COVID pandemic is affecting everybody. And it's this new normal that we're all trying to live in. And so we're absolutely understanding of that and don't ever want to penalize an applicant for something that was out of their control. But going back to the numbers thing, if they're not able to get the set number of activity hours log that they were hoping, it's not about the hours. It's about the quality of the experience and what you learn from it and what you gain from it. So that's one thing in and of itself. But again, we understand that life is different now. So be creative, look outside of your normal box and see if there are ways to get involved in the community, get healthcare experience hours, maybe telemedicine. What does that look like now? So explore different opportunities, but also keep in mind that we're all in this together. And we know that it's a tough and challenging time for everyone.
Well, let me just throw in. I did come across a student who was scribing via telemedicine.
Cool.
So I'll throw that. He's the only one I've seen so far, but they had done scribing that way. How they did, I don't know, but they were able to do it.
Yeah. Mr. Essman?
Yeah, just to kind of wrap this up, obviously, I'm going to echo what Dr. Young and Alyssa have said, but I know it's hard to think like sometimes you feel like you're the only one going through this.
Yeah.
And like Alyssa said, everybody's literally dealing with this. And these questions on secondaries, I have to think maybe next year it's going to be a COVID essay in AMCAS. It's going to be with us for the next 3 or 4 years because we know it's affecting freshmen and sophomores and juniors. We're going to have to go back and look. We'll see you had pass-fail coursework when you were a freshman, second semester, or sophomore. So this is going to stay with us for the next few years. So just know, I think what you're hearing is we're going to be forgiving because we know that everything just completely shut down. So just have faith that to know that I think med schools are going to be forgiving because of the disruptions we've all experienced.
Right. So yeah, I think a big thing to take out of that is that quality over quantity sort of thought, that it's not about how many experiences, how many hours. Really try to maximize the benefit in the story that you can tell through those. So now we're going to change up to another question. This one is about the pitfalls that some students fall into when writing their secondary applications. So we were wondering, are there any common things that you have seen students do that you thought, man, I should probably warn, upcoming applicants, don't repeat that.
The copy and paste.
Yep.
Copy and paste can be deadly if you forget to change the name of your institution you're applying to.
Yeah. Or you're discussing primary care, but then obviously talk about emergency medicine. Or you want to go to primary care, then you talk about all the research you've done. Be consistent. And as Mr. Essman said, just read over the application and be cognizant of what you're writing. They take time, but you do what you got to do.
I would say poor grammar or sloppy writing, just trying to rush through it. I know at this point, maybe a lot of students are maybe watching, if they're in the application process, they've already submitted. But to those that are applying maybe in the next year or two, it's slow down, take your time, have somebody else read it over potentially so that you can catch some of those sometimes silly errors or just poor writing that it just comes across looking sloppy,
right?
Kind of thrown together.
Right. And it's not to be mean.
Yeah.
We're dealing with patients' lives. And if you're sloppy about your writing and you don't care, are you really going to care that much about a patient who's going to entrust their life to you? So it's a continuum.
I think I want a detail-oriented physician. So
exactly.
It's reflected in your work.
Attention to detail is key. If you don't have it, you might not make the best physician. So we want to make sure we see that in your application.
Yeah, I mean, guys, part of this is what I think students should understand. This is not easy stuff. And we're trying to look into a crystal ball to see if this is a viable medical student. We know we have tough curricula. We know that they need to have certain, academic backgrounds to see that they have a history of they're going to be successful. But if you're showing us that you're kind of sloppy and you're not putting you're not putting your best foot forward, that doesn't give us a lot of confidence that you're going to ratchet it up when you become a med student.
And one other thing, don't be arrogant in feeling that I did this, I did that. Show some humility. Look, medicine will humble you. I'm a surgeon. It humbles me even as old as I am. Something will always come up. Everybody's smart in this business. But if you don't have humility, you're not going to learn anything. And if you don't learn something, you may not be able to help your patient down the line. So, and if you're not humble, you can't learn from people. So that's important. Don't be so arrogant. I did this, I did that. Yeah. Okay, fine. But you got to show some humility.
Yeah, don't come across like you're perfect. We get it. You guys are 21, 22 years old. you're still working on things and developing. I am, Dr. Young is, I'm sure Alyssa's working on something. Noah's working on something. It's okay to say, I had this experience, but I was still working on, becoming a better public speaker or getting my ideas across to people. It's okay to say I wasn't good at it, but I'm getting better and something I'm trying to develop. So that's...
That was a great discussion. I like how you guys are starting to all kind of come together and, branch off each other's ideas. I love it.
Talking shop.
So this next question I'm going to ask is about rolling admissions and the effect that coronavirus is going to have on it. So from the audience, this is, do rolling admissions play a factor in this application cycle? Will taking an MCAT test date, say, in late September, be considered late in this unconventional application cycle? And Ms. Cannataro, we can start with you.
Great. So as we've mentioned several times, this is a very different time for everyone. It's very unique in the world of admissions for all of us right now. And many of us, if not all of us, have had to shift certain parts of our application requirements, timeline, and process. So yes, there will be some differences in many admission school timelines. For us, everything shifted a little bit slightly further down the line. We normally start interviewing in September. We probably won't start interviewing until very late September, if not very early October. We set secondaries out slightly later than we normally would have. So everything is slightly shifted. And with that, we are also extending the range of which we will accept MCAT dates. So yes, submitting an MCAT from an exam taken in September is absolutely fine this cycle. In earlier cycles, it may have been considered on the later side and could have been a little bit more detrimental to your application. But this year, not so much. At least at Rush, we are sending out secondaries to those students who have not yet received their MCAT score, but we know either have a planned test date in the future or are just awaiting that score. So in years prior, we would make sure that we had our MCAT before sending secondary invitations. This year, we're moving the process forward without it, knowing that it will be coming. Just so that we can kind of move things along and let the applicants relax a little bit, knowing that, okay, I don't have that MCAT yet, but I can still fill out my secondary application and move my application through the process.
Right. Mr. Essman, how does that compare to what Case Western's doing?
Yeah, very similar. Like Rush, we've pushed back a lot of, our entire application screening, sending secondaries out. Accepting MCATs as late as the last date that the viewer mentioned, September 27th. We know there've been a lot of disruptions and canceled MCATs, so we pushed everything back and we're interviewing later. But I think it's important. Not every med school's doing that. I know a couple schools that are kind of keeping the same schedule they've had in the past. So it's very, again, school specific. You got to probably do a little homework. But I think the majority of schools, have pushed a lot of things back.
Dr. Young?
Yeah, we've done the same thing. And also folks have to remember, we leave, even though it's a rolling admission, we don't fill the class up like 90% by Christmas.
Right.
Because we know that there are going to be folks that come later on for whatever reason. So it's rolling, but there's only certain percentage of the class that fills up at each whatever interval that you choose. So, but we're adapting to that later MCAT as well.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question I have is actually also sort of related to the MCATs. And this one is specifically for non-native English speakers. So do institutions have any concerns or view unbalanced MCAT scores as well as obtaining an overall score 90th percentile and above, but low CAR score? So I think what it's saying is that for some students who don't, have English as their first or native language, maybe their CAR section is lower than some of their other sections, but maybe they scored really well in biochem and those other parts. Do institutions take that into account at all? And Dr. Young, we can start with you.
I think the admission folks are probably better than I. We look at everything. Yeah, you might have one section where you didn't do quite as well, but again, it's a holistic approach. And if English is your second or maybe third language, yeah, we're going to figure that out as well. We at least we don't like severely. It's not detrimental if someone isn't balanced. I don't think we've ever really had a conversation where someone scored well in the other ones, and this one was several percentage points lower. So, what did the other guys, panelists say?
Yeah, Mr. Essman.
Yeah, I think that first of all, applicants give us so much information in AMCATs, like your entire life history. We connect the dots and seeing your background and see that English may be your second language. And historically, verbal reasoning in the old MCAT and the CARS section have always been a little lower. Like I don't know about you, I think I see you guys nodding your heads. It's always been a little lower. So it's not uncommon for us to see that. And if there's, again, the story comes into play, we'd be able to see, well, you know, English is not their first language. So we try to put some context to everything. Now, I will say, if they have a 5 percentile in CARS, like we have to be reasonable. There has to be, you know, some reasonable there. So, but if it's I think 90s, you know, you're shooting pretty high. And if you're thinking, sometimes I find pre-meds aim pretty high and like, well, if I had an 85 in CARS, is that okay? It's like, yeah, it's fine.
That's shocking. Pre-meds being high achievers.
I know.
No.
This is saying profound things here.
Ms. Cannataro.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much else to add. My colleagues both really hit the nail on the head there. For us, we're looking more at that overall score, looking at that academic preparedness, that foundation. So if there's one, you know, subsection that's a little bit lower, it's really not going to make that big of a difference. Like Mr. Essman said, yeah, if it's significantly concerningly low, we might look into it further, but for the most part, you don't see that, and it's completely fine.
Right, that makes sense. So the next question I'm going to ask is going to turn a little bit to the interview process, which I also have a lot of questions about myself. But this one says, what is your school's interview process going to look like this year? And how is that similar or different than typical years? Who wants to take the first stab at this one?
It's not the same.
It's very different.
Very different. We're going virtual, like I'm sure everybody else is. We would traditionally we would have one traditional interview and then 8 MMI stations. Everybody has different combinations of that. This year we're going to a couple of traditional interviews. I think it's 1 or 2, and then cutting down that MMI to 3, with someone in the control room going and moving it around. So it's a logistical nightmare, but so far it's working. But for us, we like the combination of the traditional and MMI. They seem to help and balance out the applicants. So we're trying to make it as reasonable as possible. There's just no way we can do all 8 stations. So we were having a hybrid and understanding all that.
Right, that makes sense. Ms. Cannataro.
Yeah, we've moved to completely virtual. Our interview in past years was, of course, an on-campus interview. One of my favorite times of the year, because we get to invite the applicants to campus and really show them around and let them understand what the culture is at Rush and kind of the feel of the Rush life and the Rush experience. And so that was always really big for us, is experiencing what it could be like as a student at Rush. So it's unfortunate that we've lost that in-person feeling, but we're trying to do our best to replicate it on a virtual level. So the interviews will be one-on-one, 2 30-minute one-on-one interviews. We're going to do some sort of virtual tour, spend some time with our current students, so you have an opportunity to ask them questions and learn what student life is like. And then, of course, go over the curriculum and answer any questions. So it'll be a significantly abbreviated day, but we're still hoping to really showcase what makes Rush unique and special.
And I'd like to add a quick thing to what you said, Ms. Cannataro, that's huge, is that part of what interview day is actually seeing the school and the institution for yourself, getting to meet the students, see the buildings, where you're going to potentially be for 4 years. So although it's also a challenge for the admissions offices to interview long distance, it's also a challenge for the students as well.
100%. It's a very, very different experience for those interviewing this year than students who have interviewed in past years.
Right. Mr. Essman, anything to add?
Yeah, like Ms. Cannataro said, we're doing the similar thing. We have our interviews online. We're doing 2 in-person, Zoom interviews, and trying to replicate what we can, but also be conscious of Zoom fatigue, not keeping people on, not replicating an entire in-person day like we had pre-COVID, like for 8 hours or something, but being mindful of that. But I think what's killing all of us is missing that in-person ability, because applicants are really good at picking up the vibe of the school when you're there, and I think we're going to miss that. We're all struggling with that a little bit. So keep your fingers crossed, mask up, that hopefully in the spring we can have like small, in-person visits or something at our schools. So, do your job.
One thing I will, it's difficult for a lot of students. I think it's also maybe a little bit more difficult for underrepresented students as well. Seeing whether or not that institution is really one for them, that they're going to take care of them, look after them. And we've gone online and have videos posted as well. But that one-on-one talking, looking folks in the eye, and that interpersonal relationship we strive to obtain. It's hard, but we're trying to do our best to, and I'm sure you all as well, to show that your institutions are ones that care about your applicants, regardless of their background, and that you welcome everybody to come in. So we're going to do our best to create that environment.
Right. If I could say one other thing, I guess an advantage to this method that we're going to use this year is it's going to be more cost effective for applicants.
That's true.
I mean, so in the past, like we got later in the season, we would see some cancellations because students may have interviewed at 3 or 4 places. Like, I'm in a couple places, I'm good. I'm going to save that money and not travel to Cleveland. But now you have the advantage of maybe if you get a few extra interviews to just do them, and then you might be pleasantly surprised.
I was also thinking, students would have to go and buy suits before. Now they only have to buy the jacket and the shirt. You don't have to worry about the shoes and stuff. It's all Zoom.
Yeah, but still make sure the clothing is appropriate for an interview.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, we put together some tips, and we just said, wear pants though, because
just in case,
but it makes you feel like you're still like in the moment. You're still in that.
You're not going to the club,
Yeah, that's right.
So serious.
Yeah, that's right.
So this next question I'm going to turn to is about tips for interview and prepping for the interview. So what are some tips that you have for students who are preparing for interviews? Maybe that's generic advice that you'd offer every year. Maybe that's even more specific advice given what it's going to look like this year. Dr. Young, we can start with you.
Be yourself. Now, if you have difficulty expressing yourself, then you get someone to sit down and practice with you. Such that you're able to convey your ideas in a coherent and cogent manner. So be yourself, but you got to be always cognizant of who you are and what you are. Folks that come in and don't give the interviewer a chance to say 2 questions, that's a problem. You ask 1 question, you look down, and 30 minutes is over. Like, what happened? So you got to be aware of the way you interview and be open to suggestions that change your behavior if it's detrimental. But go and practice with people, but make sure that you're able to convey your ideas. And if you have difficulty, go practice whatever may be lacking. But be open-minded about it, because you're going to be interviewing the rest of your career. And now is the time to work on those issues, because as Noah knows, he's going to start going for interviews as well. But if you can't project yourself, who you are, in a cogent and humble way, then it's going to be harder for you to get that resonancy. It's a job interview, basically. So all those things apply.
Yeah, I'll add that a lot of the things about applying to medical school repeat when you apply to residency. The standardized tests don't stop. The interviews don't stop. So It's great experience now to really get it down. Mr. Essman, any general tips, advice for prepping?
Sure. I think for this year, I mean, one, you want to make sure your technology works. So practice, make sure everything's working. Anybody can get a Zoom account, or I don't know if not every school is using Zoom, but make sure your technology works. If the school sends you instructions to test something out beforehand, do that beforehand. Not 5 minutes beforehand, but a few days in advance. And then I might recommend practice being interviewed with somebody over Zoom. Get a basic account, and I'm looking at the camera right now, and I think now we're realizing more than ever that we're watching ourselves. We can see ourselves being viewed. So we look at ourselves like, how are we looking here? And like, but you want to simulate this as much as you can, and then maybe you record it. You can go, as uncomfortable it is to go back and watch it. Maybe record it and then go back and watch it and see if you're fidgeting with something, or you're playing with your hair, or your microphone sounds bad. That's the way I think you can set yourself up to feel ready for the game day, right? Like, feel ready that I practiced this, and the questions, you're not going to know what's coming, but if you can kind of practice some of the other things, maybe you can go into it feeling just that much more comfortable.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Miss Cannataro?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything that was said. Really, the only other thing that I would add here is kind of going off of what Dr. Young said in knowing yourself and knowing how to present yourself, but also know your application. Know what you put in your application. If you put it in your application, it's fair game to be
fair game.
And so if you forgot you wrote something, or you elaborated on something more than you probably should have, just know that you have to be ready to talk about all of those things. So know yourself, be confident in who you are, but at the same time remaining humble. I like that Dr. Young keeps using that word, because I don't think it's used enough in admissions. And be come ready to learn, but also ready to share who you are and what you can bring to the table.
Right. And there's one other point I want to add to what Mr. Essman said that I like, is that really, try to look at how you interact or talk on these Zoom calls, because I've done a few of these broadcasts now, and I start noticing things when I watch back the tapes. It always pains me to watch them again. Just little mannerisms, what I have in my background, what do I need to move around, my bed sheets all thrown around. So keep in mind your background.
The background is key. Make sure it looks professional. What you're wearing is professional. All those little things.
That's right. Don't do
and if you have pets. Sorry, Dr. Young.
That's okay. No, I was just saying, don't do your interview from Chuck E. Cheese or the park or something like that. Make it professional.
Right.
I will say though, I mean, if you're in a situation where, like, you live at home with 4 brothers and sisters and you share a room, and if there's family disruptions, we get it. It might happen. We're all at home right now. And if that's what your situation is, don't feel, I would hope that a school wouldn't judge you, because that's where you have to do your interview from. And that's where maybe if your computer can handle those Zoom backgrounds, I know they have to have a certain kind of specs. If you can do one of those digital backgrounds, then you wouldn't, have to worry about what's behind you and stuff. You could just let they can focus on you and not what's in the background. So something to be mindful of.
Yeah, I like that. We're all human. Even the admissions officers are human. We promise.
Yeah.
So the next question I want to turn to has to do with, looks like virtual shadowing. So this question says, will medical schools accept virtual shadowing as shadowing hours? Is it okay to list various virtual shadowing hours into one activity? Mr. Essman, we can let you start with this question.
I just heard about this in the last week or two, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there was one group they worked out an arrangement with a doctor, and they're going like Facebook Live through the clinic, but they're not showing the patients, but they're with the physician, and whoever can log on and just follow along with the conversation with like the person that's running it. they're listening to the comments, that the questions that the student is asking to the physician, but they're obviously being mindful of HIPAA. Yeah. That's what I've heard virtual shadowing is. I mean, this is one of the things that comes out of all these disruptions. So it's hard for me to say. I think it's a great effort. I don't think we haven't really had a discussion about it. Yeah, like I said, I started about this like a week and a half ago. So I think it's a nice effort. We'll have to see kind of what it is, but I don't know. It's too new for me and I don't want to comment because we haven't really talked about it as a team at our school.
Yeah, honestly, this was the first time that I've heard of it, but everyone's coming up with innovative ways, it looks like, to get around these problems. Miss Cannataro?
Yeah, I think it's incredible to see the innovation happening and seeing how people are turning to technology in this new world that we're living in. I think it's probably a little too soon to really say yes or no. I think I need a little bit more information. I need to understand a little bit more about what the experience entails. I also think it really depends. Just like any shadowing experience, a virtual shadowing experience can probably, vary drastically between provider to provider. So it depends on your experience and kind of what you're getting out of it and what you're gaining from it. So I don't think I can say no, because I think there is probably a lot that could be taken from it, but it might just be a little too soon to really say.
Right. Dr. Young?
Yeah, sure, try it. But with any experience, what you get out of it? Especially we're looking for MD-patient relationship. Do you understand what that is? Now, we've had folks do lots of shadowing hours, but they still don't get it. You ask them, well, what did you learn during that time with the patient and the doctor? Well, what was the most significant thing you learned from that patient-doctor relationship? Well, how did that doctor interact with that patient? If you just sit there dumbfounded, well, you may have had a lot of hours, but you haven't internalized what we're trying to get you all to do. And that's to figure out what it is we're trying to impart to the patient, but also, do you have a capacity to do that? Are you that type of person? Are you compassionate, empathetic, that you want to sit down and look somebody in the eye, hold their hands, and take care of them?
Right.
You got to figure that out. And that's why we put you through all this.
And to come back to a phrase that we used earlier in the show was about quality over quantity.
Yeah.
Just what did you get out of it? It's not about how many hours. It's about the value of those hours.
All right.
Absolutely.
So the next question I want to ask has to do with post-baccalaureate programs. So this one says, how do institutions view Masters of Medical Science and post-bac to help with GPAs? Ms. Cannataro, we can start with you on this one.
Great question. I get this question all the time. So oftentimes I'll get this question from either students who struggled academically and want to use a post-bac or a master's program for academic enhancement, or maybe somebody who is a career changer and who had no idea that they actually wanted to go into medicine until recent years. And so they'll do these formal post-bac programs or hard science master's programs. And they can be an excellent way to prove your readiness for medical school, as long as they are formal post-bac programs or those hard science master's programs designed to prepare you for medical school. There's a big difference between a student taking a formal post-bac program for academic enhancement than a student choosing to get a master's in public health in hopes of preparing them for a stronger application to medical school. Not to say that a master's in public health isn't wonderful. If you're passionate about public health and you plan on incorporating that into your profession as a physician, wonderful. But if you're truly looking for academic enhancement and to improve your academics in an application cycle, you need to do a formal program that will prepare you for medical school. So that's the key takeaway for us.
Okay. Dr. Young?
We absolutely agree. We have folks go get their Masters of Public Health, but the courses they're taking are not the hard sciences. So you've not given us anything to judge you against, to say, yes, you have now gotten you may have an ascending GPA, or as Alyssa said, to enhance it. So you really have to be cognizant of the post-bac programs you're going to put yourself through to make sure it's going to get you to where you need to go.
Yeah. Mr. Essman?
I think there's an important distinction between post-bacs and master's programs. Traditional post-bac programs are typically for career changers, or those that maybe you're an econ major as an undergrad, but you didn't take the sciences and you're like, you know what, I always want to go to medical school and I'm going to do it now. But so you need to go get the Gen Chem and OChem and biology, things like that. That's a traditional post-bac program. And that GPA factors into your undergraduate GPA. So if you were a neuroscience major and things didn't go like you had hoped in undergrad, you can't go do a post-bac because you'd be retaking Gen Chem and OChem. And you don't. So then you need a master's program, and that's like a separate line item. It's a separate GPA. So it doesn't factor into your overall GPA. So a master's program is like kind of, you're looking for academic redemption, right? Like you're looking to show, okay, what happened in undergrad happened in undergrad, but now like I'm really going to show you I have the chops and I'm doing this hard science master's program.
Yeah, I like that. Drawing the distinction is very important because they are certainly not the same things. So the next question, I want to jump a little bit back to interviews. And this one has to do with successes or failures of previous examples you've seen. So are there any strong examples of either fantastic or dreadful interview performances that you have experienced?
I'm sure we all have.
So maybe what did you see that was done particularly well or particularly poorly?
Oh, Mr. Essman's ready. He was getting ready. I saw him.
I think that I've had fantastic interviews with, I think the vast majority of people that I interview are usually fantastic conversations. You connect with them, they're prepared, you learn something about them. I think that's the key, is that sometimes you interview somebody and they kind of keep their cards close to their vest, if you will, and you don't learn anything more about them beyond what was in the application. They told you the same stories or alluded to the same things that were in the application. They didn't expand on that. So if I can learn something more about them and really try to let them settle in and let them really come out, let them really be who they are is great. I think the dreadful ones are those that really are lacking some self-awareness, or they're just the way they're like kind of sitting, at the interview and, kind of laying out and cursing. I'm not a fan of cursing. I mean, I've had some, it doesn't happen a lot, but just it's like this lack of awareness where they think we're kind of hanging out at, the club or something, and I just like, I'm not cursing in the interview. Why is this person saying this stuff? And it's just like, okay, well, let's wrap it up. So,
Miss Cannataro.
That's a perfect segue into what I was actually going to mention, and just kind of a lack of awareness that you're on an interview. And of course, this is for the terrible example. And unfortunately or fortunately, with virtual interviews, we probably won't get this as much this year. But in years past, there's definitely been those students who sometimes forget that even if they're not in the formal one-on-one interview setting, that the entire day really is an interview. And so while we might not be assessing you right there on a piece of paper, we are observing your interactions with others. If you're constantly on your phone every second you get, not paying attention, falling asleep during a session, I've literally seen it. Saying something inappropriate to the current students, they're going to recognize that. They're going to hear it. They're going to tell us. We're going to see it. And it just kind of goes, it's just another point that will be noted in your application as far as kind of the unspoken and the informal interview experience that we have with you. So just keep in mind, from the second you walk in the door, honestly, from the second you have a phone conversation with someone at the institution, know that that person could remember your name. And so don't be rude to anybody. Always put your best foot forward, even when you don't think anyone's watching. It could be noticed.
Dr. Young?
There's lots of ways to ruin an interview. One thing, but be yourself. But one thing is like when you ask a question, when someone asks, have an answer, just say yes, no, well, and it's short. It's like 2-3 sentences. And then you go to the next question and it's like, yes, no. And you're sitting there and they're looking at you and you're looking at them and you've gone through all your questions. They've said absolutely nothing. Mm-hmm. So you have to be able to be engaged. Yeah, we know some folks might have Asperger's. A lot of smart folks do, and we understand that. But for the folks who just can't articulate, forget it, because what we have to converse not only with our patients but with our colleagues as well. If you can't impart your ideas and your thoughts in a cohesive and a cogent manner to the people with whom you work, then you cannot be effective. You just can't. So that's why it's important to go back and review what you've done, and that it's fluid, and that you're yourself, and you know, just have someone review you.
Yeah. And I'd also like to jump back to sort of what Mr. Essman and Ms. Cannataro mentioned. I think it's going to be more challenging this year more than ever to keep up that performance, that formality, that professionalism when you could be at home in your bedroom on the laptop or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I like what we said before about practicing, really work on making those Zoom calls and keeping that professionalism up, because that's really important. And even in medical school, you will be evaluated on your professionalism. Mm-hmm.
I think too, when you go back to practicing, like, it's also okay to be you want to try to connect, to be emotive over this digital interviewing stuff. We want to see you smile and laugh. You should also be having fun a little bit. Okay. Like, this process should be kind of fun. I mean, it's an interview day. You're getting your shot at this. I mean, don't let your nerves get the better of you. You should be kind of pumped too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I totally agree. Getting interviews, it's no easy task. You're all smart people, and it's an honor. It's an honor to get offered an interview. So I'll be honest, that is all the questions that we have for tonight. There are some also additional specific questions, but I'll encourage the viewers, if you have any more specific questions, feel free to reach out to any of our panelists. Is it okay if we give out your email addresses? Or something like that.
I'm going to get to it, but we can try.
I would say, or some sort of admissions office email address.
Yeah,
work it out. Sure. Yep.
I'm just joking.
And so what I'll say is, the one last question I'll have for you guys is just one takeaway summary point from tonight. Maybe it's something you heard, maybe it's something you thought of, maybe it's your big takeaway advice you give to everyone. But what is one sort of highlight, leave home points for our viewers tonight? Anyone want to take this one first?
I think it's an amalgam of everything we've chatted about, all those little nuances. But I think it really comes down to knowing that this is what you really want to do. Have you really thought about what you're dedicating the rest of your life to? The next 4 intensive years. Remember, medical school is the most difficult postgraduate education there is. There's nothing more harder than this. And then you're going to go in a residency that lasted anywhere from 3 to 9 years. I went for like 7 or 8. I lost track. But you really have to know. You really have to be dedicated and determined that this is what you want to do. And don't be wishy-washy. And if you love primary care, great. If you whatever you want to go into, know what you want to do. Know yourself, know your limitations, and be able to articulate where you came from. If you had hardships getting to where you are, that's okay, because if you had a hard time coming up and you've gotten this far, it says a whole lot about your character, that you have that grit to be able to make it despite the background that you came from. That means a lot to us, because that means you've got that stick-to-itiveness that's going to be able to grind it out till you get to the end.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. Ms. Cannataro?
Yeah, I think going right along with that, in addition to knowing yourself, know when you're truly ready. This is the thing I tell every single pre-medical student I meet on the road, is one of the best things you can do for yourself and your application is submitting your application when you're ready. So many applicants want to rush. They're excited. They want to go to med school. They know that this is what they want to do. And so they'll prematurely submit an application without really sitting there and thinking about, do I have the experiences that have prepared me for medical school, whether that's academically, socially, leadership, healthcare exposure, all those experiences. Am I emotionally ready? Have I matured enough, or do I need some more just life experience? Am I burnt out from undergrad and I just need to take some time and work for a little bit before I go back to school? Medical school is not going anywhere. We're always going to need physicians. There's always going to be spots open. There's absolutely no reason to rush your application. That's the number one way to fail, is submitting an application that isn't ready. So take the time to really have an honest conversation with yourself and think about if you're truly ready. And if you are, that's great. And submit that application and be proud and be confident. But if you're not, there's no shame in delaying, taking a gap year or two, and taking the time and doing the steps that you need to do to submit a strong application.
And one thing I'll add to what Ms. Cannataro said is that if you don't know anyone who's in medicine, if you don't have connections to know what medical school is going to be like, feel free to shoot me an email or email us at ypi@ubon.org. We'll do our best to set you up and get you in communication with somebody who is a current medical student, because I think it's really important to know what you're signing up for. I mean, Dr. Young said, 4 years of residency, 5 years, whatever, plus fellowship. I mean, it's a long path. It's a long path. So know what you're signing up for. But it's a very rewarding path as well. Mr. Essman, I haven't forgotten about you.
No. Ms. Cannataro and Dr. Young, these are total pros, and I agree with everything they've said. And I guess my takeaway would be just acknowledging the moment that we're in right now. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty. Students are going back to college right now, and maybe they'll, Notre Dame lasted 8 days, and they were shut down for a little bit, and so extracurriculars are going to continue to be disruptive, and so I know there's a lot of uncertainty, and you're worried about potentially this volunteering and the shadowing and research that you wanted to have, but it's not work. Just be kind to yourself. Know that you're not the only one going through this. And I hope the message that's come through tonight is that med schools, we're real people. We're going to be forgiving, and we understand the things you're having to go through right now. So the future applications aren't going to look like what we're used to. And so I think we're going to be evolving too, but be kind to yourself right now, and don't put too much pressure on yourself to think you have to maintain or get these hours and stuff that we talked about earlier. Just take it easy on yourself, I guess is my point.
Right. And I think that message is especially important for pre-meds. I remember I definitely held myself to a very high standard, and I know that's very common. So really take that to heart. So as we conclude, I'm just going to bring Abdallah back on one more time, and he's going to tell us real quick about what our next brief episode is going to be like. Abdallah, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Noah. Thank you to all our panelists for their information and their time. Really appreciate you guys being here. But for our next episode, we have a little something cooking with Stanford about leadership development in medical students. And so be on the lookout for that. Subscribe to our YouTube, like our Facebook page, and I'll post a link here. And it should be in 3 or 4 weeks. I think we've had one with Stanford as well, with Harvard as well. I think, Noah, you can talk about that a little bit. But I think this is our 4th or 5th episode. So feel free to look back on our episodes and really listen to all the professionals we've had featured on our show.
And I'm going to bring back our panelists one more time just to say a quick thank you and good night. So big thank you to Mr. Essman, Dr. Young, Ms. Cannataro. You guys were fantastic. It's just so important to get this message out to as many people as possible and really humanize the admissions officers in this whole process. So thank you. A special thanks again to Abdallah for helping organize tonight's events. Thank you, Dr. Kelly, for giving us the streaming platform. Special thanks to Daniel Kaganov for making our videos. To all of our viewers, please share this with your peers and institutions. give us a follow, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the social media. And check out our website to view some of our past live streams. And that's it for me. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great night.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Good luck,
See ya.
everyone.
Bye-bye.